Welcome to The Explainer. Look, we've all been there, right? You build an AI app, you tweak one tiny thing in your prompt, and boom, the whole thing just falls apart. Well, today we're going to dig into exactly why that happens and, more importantly, how LangChain's smart approach to prompts can take you from a fragile prototype to a seriously solid, production-ready application.
So let me ask you this. Is your AI application this fragile? I mean, think about it. If one little typo in a variable, or maybe a missing piece of data from your database, can just crash the whole experience for your users, is that thing really ready for production? And this isn't some far-off hypothetical, you know? This is a super common problem, and it almost always comes down to one thing: how we're building our prompts.
And this right here, this is the whole game. On one side, you've got manual S-strings. We all do it when we start out, right? Because it feels fast and easy. But that speed is an illusion. You're trading it for code that's super brittle, a total pain to test, and just a nightmare to maintain down the line. But on the other side, LangChain templates, they completely flip that. You get a foundation that is validated, reusable, and just built to last, right from the get-go.
So let's talk about this manual prompt problem. When you're just jamming strings together, you're basically injecting fragility right into the heart of your AI's brain. And that makes your code, well, it makes it really, really hard to debug, impossible to scale cleanly, and a real headache to maintain.
But here's the solution. This is where LangChain comes in with a totally different and, frankly, better way of thinking about this. It's really a mindset shift. You have to stop thinking of prompts as just, throwaway strings. Instead, you start seeing them as structured, reusable blueprints for how you talk to your AI. And the core of this whole solution is something called the prompt template. The real genius here is that it splits apart the static part of your prompt, the instructions, from the dynamic data that changes every single time. It gives it structure, sure, but the most important part, it adds a layer of validation that you just don't get with plain old strings.
And look, this isn't just about writing pretty code. The impact on your actual productivity is just huge. We're talking about slashing your prompt development and debugging time by up to 80%. 80%. Just think about what that means for your team's efficiency. It's a massive win.
It's not just about speed either. It actually makes your final product better because every single prompt follows that same validated structure. You get up to 70% more consistent outputs. And that's not just some number on a dashboard. For your users, that consistency is everything. It's the difference between an AI that feels reliable and trustworthy versus one that just feels random and unpredictable. Okay, and this might be the most important one for anyone running a live system. It's all about reliability. That built-in validation, it catches errors before you waste money on an expensive API call. And even more critically, it catches them before your user ever sees a broken result. This one little change can cut your prompt-related errors in production by a whopping 65%.
So, okay, the numbers are pretty convincing, right? Huge gains in efficiency, way more reliability. But what does this actually look like in the code? Well, the difference is night and day. Let's dive in and see the before and after.
All right, let's start with a classic example, something pretty much every app needs to do at some point: generating a personalized email.
Okay, so on the left, you've got the old way, the manual F-string. Sure, it's fast to type out, but it's basically a ticking time bomb. One typo in one of those variable names, and your whole function just blows up. Now look at the right. That's the LangChain prompt template. You define that blueprint just one time, and it's solid by design.
And this is where you really see the magic happen. The number one difference? That automatic validation. If you forget to pass in the username, your code doesn't just fail silently later on. It fails right away with a super clear error message. This simple change turns your prompt from just a dumb string into a real, reusable, and most importantly, testable piece of your app.
All right, so that was a pretty simple example. But this whole blueprint idea, it really starts to shine when you get into more complex stuff. So let's level up and look at a chatbot, something that has to remember the history of a conversation. Ugh, look at the code on the left. Trying to manage that list of messages by hand is just awful. You've got to manually add the system message, then loop through all the past messages, then append the new user message, and you better hope you get the formatting exactly right. It's just asking for bugs. But with the chat prompt template on the right, you just define that structure one time, and poof, LangChain handles injecting the entire conversation history for you. It's so much cleaner.
So yeah, the key takeaway here is the automatic memory. You just stop writing all those messy loops to build your conversation history. LangChain does the heavy lifting, making sure every message has the right role, system, user, assistant, and the perfect formatting. And trust me, getting that right is absolutely critical for getting good responses from these chat models.
Okay, so the benefits are pretty obvious by now. So let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually do this? How do you build these production-ready prompts in your own code? Well, it's actually a really simple process.
It really comes down to these 5 steps. First, you define your blueprint. Figure out your variables. Write the text. Second, you create the actual prompt template object. Third, and this is super important, you test it. Test it by itself with some fake data to make sure it looks right. Fourth, you integrate it into a LangChain chain, connecting it to an LLM. And finally, you iterate. You measure how it's doing and tweak it to make it even better.
And I really want to stress this. Adopting this pattern isn't just about tidying up your code. It's so much bigger than that. When you start building with these solid blueprints, you're actually laying the foundation you need to build way more advanced, way more complex AI systems.
There's a really common misconception here. It's easy to look at this and think, oh, so prompt templates are just fancy F-strings. But that's not it at all. The reality is you're making a fundamental shift. You're moving away from telling the computer how to build a string step by step, and instead you're just declaring what the final thing should look like. You're not just formatting strings anymore, you are engineering real composable components.
And this whole idea of building a foundation that can scale really rests on 3 key pillars. First, you get that structured validation before you make that expensive call to the LLM. Second, you get model abstraction. That means you can use the same prompt template with a model from OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, and it just works. And third, and this is where it gets really powerful, you get composition. You can chain these things together where the output of one prompt becomes the input for the next. That's how you build complex workflows.
So look, if you only remember one thing from all this, make it this. Prompts are not just strings. They are composable, testable components. Once you make that mental shift, you've unlocked the secret to building reliable, scalable, and seriously powerful AI applications.
So by moving from these fragile little strings to production-ready blueprints, you're doing more than just fixing errors. You're building the solid foundation that the next generation of AI agents and chains is going to be built on. So now that your foundation is solid, the real question is, what are you going to build?